In 12th century China during the Jin dynasty, the physical body of an aristocratic woman functioned as far more than a biological vessel. It operated as a highly regulated commodity, an instrument of a social leverage and a golden cage. Society equated a woman's fundamental worth, her security, and her sanity with her physical beauty and her adherence to domestic duty. To exist successfully in this paradigm meant cultivating the self-image of a refined, desirable, noble woman. Shunbue was born directly into this matrix. Raised in a wealthy, highly educated family in the Shandong province, she was renowned for her intense intellect and her striking physical features. She lived a comfortable traditional life, married a prominent man named Ma Yu, managed a massive opulent estate and raised 3 children. By all the social metrics of medieval China, she stood as the absolute epitome of success, stability and sanity. She mastered the game of human existence. Yet, in her early 50s, Shunbue and her husband encountered a wandering ascetic named Wang Chongyang. Wang, the founder of the Kuajin Complete Reality School of Internal Taoist Alchemy, brought a radical, uncompromising method of immortality. He taught that the physical world acted as a heavy, dense illusion and that true liberation required reversing the natural flow of biological energy, abandoning worldly attachments, and cultivating the golden elixir within the body. Shunbue possessed a piercing, ruthless intelligence and understood Wang's philosophy immediately. She saw entirely through the illusion of her estate, her wealth, and her social standing. As she prepared to abandon her old life and dedicated herself entirely to the Kuan-Yin path, she faced a brutal, terrifying, practical problem. She needed to leave her home and travel hundreds of miles to the city of Luoyang to practice intense solitary meditation. As a beautiful, wealthy, aristocratic woman traveling alone in medieval China, she knew the world would refuse to let her go. Bandits would see a target, men would see an object of desire, other women would see a scandal. At every turn, society would interact with her based entirely on her physical appearance. Worse than the external threat was the internal trap. Shunbue knew the insidious nature of the ego. As long as she possessed a face that the world admired, her own mind would secretly, quietly feed on that validation. So she made a calculation of absolute chilling clarity. She walked into her kitchen, stoked the fire, and placed a wok filled with cooking oil over the flames and waited until the oil reached a rolling, violent boil. Without hesitation, she lifted the boiling oil and deliberately splashed it across her own face. The physical agony of that moment defies human comprehension. The boiling liquid melted her skin, destroyed her nerves, and blistered her flesh with horrific scars. In a matter of seconds, she killed the beautiful aristocratic woman named Shunbue. And when she finally emerged from the kitchen, she was completely disfigured. Her family was horrified. The local society reeled in shock. To the world, this appeared as the act of a woman suffering a massive, violent psychotic break. People labeled her as a tragic lunatic whose mind had completely snapped under the pressure of religious fanaticism. When the skin on her face melted away, the social contract she had been bound by permanently shattered. Suddenly, no man wanted her, and no aristocratic woman envied her. The world looked at her with revulsion. Inside that revulsion, Shunbue found absolute, untouchable freedom. The world had entirely lost its grip on her. She walked out of her estate and traveled the long and dangerous road to Luoyang, completely unbothered. No one troubled the disfigured beggar. She took up residence in a ruined, abandoned kiln outside the city. Free from the endless noise of social expectation, human desire, and vanity, she plugged into the absolute depths of internal alchemy. In the silence of that ruined kiln, she mastered the Kuan-Yin techniques. She transmuted her vital energy, authored profound texts on Taoist meditation, and achieved a state of realization so deep that she became the only female member of the legendary Seven Immortals of Kuan-Yin Taoism. When Sun Bu destroyed the ego's attachment to physical appearance, a woman in 1920s India demolished an even deeper, more fundamental illusion: the attachment to free will. The core pillar of the human psychological structure rests on the unwavering belief that we act as the doer. We believe, without question, that a distinct entity lives inside our heads, making decisions, moving our arms, choosing our words, and steering the ship of our lives. In Hindu philosophy, this illusion of the active agent is called the karta. The ancient texts warn that maintaining this belief generates karma, trapping the individual in the endless grinding cycle of suffering and rebirth. Nirmala Sundari was born in 1896 in a small village in rural Bengal. Growing up as an uneducated girl from a poor Orthodox Brahmin family, she adhered strictly to the cultural norms of her time. Married at 13 to a man named Bholanath, she spent her teenage years performing the grueling, monotonous duties of a traditional Hindu housewife: cooking, cleaning, serving her husband's family, and maintaining absolute submissiveness. To the outside world, she appeared entirely ordinary, a quiet girl perfectly assimilated into the monotony of her domestic life. In her early 20s, Nirmala's central nervous system began to undergo a terrifying, spontaneous, and violent transformation. While performing normal household chores like sweeping the floor or preparing rice, Nirmala's body would suddenly freeze. Without any conscious intention, she would collapse to the ground, her limbs contorting into impossibly complex, advanced yogic postures, asanas, that she had never studied or even seen before. Her body would twist into the most difficult mudras. These physical spasms arrived alongside extreme emotional volatility. She would burst into fits of ecstatic, uncontrollable laughter that reverberated through the house, followed immediately by hours of devastating, inconsolable weeping. Most terrifying to her husband and family were her states of spontaneous samadhi. Nirmala would fall into trances so incredibly deep that her biology seemed to shut down. Her body would grow cold and stiff as a corpse. Her heartbeats slowed to a barely undetectable rhythm, and her breath retention, kumbhaka, was spontaneous as her breathing became completely imperceptible to those watching her. She also refused to eat, drink, sleep, or speak, simply ceasing to function as a biological organism. Bholanath was terrified. He brought in local doctors who observed her rigid body and erratic behavior, diagnosed her with severe clinical hysteria. When medical science failed, the family turned to religion. The local priests and exorcists claimed dark, wandering spirits had taken hold of her. They attempted violent exorcisms to cure her madness, subjecting her to physical rituals to drive the demons out. Beneath this terrifying exterior, Nirmala was experiencing the absolute total surrender of the ego. The illusion of the doer was collapsing in real time. She later became known to the world as Anandamayi Ma, the joy-permeated mother, recognized as one of the greatest mystics of the 20th century. Decades later, when the scholars and devotees asked her about the bizarre behavior of her early years, her explanation shattered the concept of human agency. She explained that during those years, she retained absolutely zero control over her body. The yoga simply moved her limbs, the crying arose and fell without her permission. She had directly realized the ultimate terrifying truth of non-duality. A single consciousness permeates the universe, and human beings exist merely as hollow instruments through which it plays. The ego functions just as a cramp in that infinite consciousness, a tight, arrogant knot of resistance claiming ownership over the universe's movements. When that knot untied, Anandamayi Ma's body became a literal puppet of the divine. With the doer eradicated, she stopped referring to herself as I or me. For the remaining 60 years of her life, she only referred to herself in the third person, calling herself this body or this little girl. To the medical establishment of the 1920s, she appeared as a schizophrenic catatonic. Her insanity, however, represented the highest state of sanity possible. She had relinquished the crushing, exhausting burden of free will. She carried no personal desires, plans for the future, or fears, because no distinct Nirmala remained to possess them. If her followers asked her where she planned to travel the next day, she would simply smile and say, "This body will go wherever the wind blows it." Entirely unattached to her own actions, she proved that absolute freedom arrives only when you realize you have never been in control. Once the body is exposed as a cage and free will as a hallucination, the ego retreats to its final, safest refuge: morality. Religion provides the ultimate safe house for the self. The ego loves playing the role of the holy person. It thrives on following rules, acquiring virtues, judging the wicked, and feeling morally superior. Conditioning teaches us that the universe operates on a transactional ledger. Being good, pure, pious, and obedient guarantees a cosmic reward. In 13th century France, a mystic named Marguerite Porete realized this entire moral framework functioned just as another labyrinth created by the ego to keep itself alive. Marguerite belonged to the Beguines, a massive grassroots movement of devout women scattered across northern Europe. The Beguines lived in spiritual communities, dedicating themselves to prayer and charity outside the strict patriarchal control of the Catholic Church. Taking no formal vows to male bishops made the ecclesiastical authorities deeply suspicious of them. Fiercely intelligent and highly literate, Marguerite pushed past the polite boundaries of Orthodox Christianity, moving straight into the blistering non-dual heart of the Absolute. She authored a book in Old French, the language of the common people, titled The Mirror of Simple Souls. Detailing the 7 stages of spiritual ascent, she outlined standard Christian piety in the early stages. The 5th and the 6th stages, however, sent shockwaves of sheer terror through the Catholic Inquisition. Marguerite claimed that a soul completely consumed by divine love undergoes a process she called annihilation. The soul completely dissolves into God, losing all distinct boundaries, exactly like a drop of water falling into a vast ocean. She then presented her apocalyptic blasphemy. An annihilated soul permanently outgrows the church. It requires no sacraments, priests, prayers, or fasts. Most terrifying of all, she claimed that the awakened soul outgrows virtue. To the medieval Catholic Church, this represented the definition of absolute demonic madness. How could a holy person discard morality? Without the laws of virtue, nothing would stop an individual from committing every sin imaginable. Marguerite explained her realization calmly. Morality exists exclusively for people who remain separate from God. A separate person has a distinct ego and therefore must actively choose virtue over sin. When the soul becomes annihilated, when the drop becomes the ocean and no individual remains to make a moral choice, you become the goodness itself. A fire doesn't try to be hot. An annihilated soul acts with perfect love spontaneously, operating entirely unattached to the dualistic concepts of sin, salvation, heaven, or hell. The Catholic Church recognized this teaching as a weapon of mass destruction aimed directly at the throat of their authority. If the masses realize their inherent oneness with God and abandon external rules, the entire hierarchy of priests, popes, indulgences, and tithes would instantly collapse. The Inquisition, led by the Dominican friar William of Paris, arrested Marguerite and dragged her before a tribunal of theologians. They demanded she recant her book, burn her writings, and submit to the absolute authority of the church, threatening her with the most agonizing torture and execution. For a year and a half, Marguerite sat in a cold, dark dungeon in Paris, facing the most powerful, terrifying men in Europe. She took a vow of absolute silence. Entirely, radically unattached to their judgment, she recognized that defending herself would require stepping back into the dualistic world of right and wrong, inquisitor and victim. She simply refused to play the game. In 1310, condemned as a relapsed heretic, she was dragged to the Place de Grève in the center of Paris. Tied to a wooden stake, the executioners lit the pyre beneath her. Historical accounts from the crowd that day report a scene that bewildered the minds of everyone who witnessed it. As the flame rose and began to consume her flesh, Marguerite Porete remained perfectly, impossibly calm. A profound ecstatic peace radiated from her face. As the fire burned her alive, she smiled. The crowd gathered to watch a wicked heretic burn, broke down and wept at the sight of her serenity. Marguerite Porete proved that true Asangoham requires unattachment even from the concept of holiness. She broke the moral matrix, burning to death because she loved the absolute truth more than she loved the safety of religion. The spiritual journey eventually reaches an ultimate boundary. You can destroy your attachment to your body, surrender your free will, and transcend the rules of morality. A final terror awaits when you lose the one thing you have spent your entire life searching for, when the architect of the universe disappears. In the late 20th century, an American Catholic nun named Bernadette Roberts experienced an awakening so bleak and absolute that it almost destroyed her psychologically. Bernadette entered a strict cloistered monastery at a young age, dedicating her life to silent, rigorous contemplation, successfully navigating the grueling spiritual dry spells that Christian mystics call the dark night of the senses and the dark night of the soul. She achieved what Christian theology considers the absolute highest possible state of human existence, transforming union with God. She felt a constant, overwhelming, loving presence of the divine within her very center. Her ego sat quiet, her daily life flowed peacefully, and she had found the ultimate unbreakable anchor. Then the mountain evaporated. In her 50s, living a quiet life after leaving the formal cloister, Bernadette experienced an event with no parallel in standard Christian theology. She called it the no-self event. Over a period of a few days, the entire center of her consciousness completely vanished. The ego she had worked so hard to quiet disappeared, and alongside it, the loving presence of God. The divine center she had prayed to, loved, communed with, and relied upon for decades also vanished entirely. She plunged into a state of absolute, infinite, freezing emptiness. In psychiatric terms, her experience mirrors the most severe crippling forms of depersonalization and derealization disorders. The world completely lost its meaning. Inside, outside, the soul, the Savior, and heaven all ceased to exist. A terrifying blank mechanical reality functioned on its own, and the effective center of her brain, the part that generates human emotion, longing, and connection, shut down. She wandered the beaches and coastal roads of California in a state of existential shock. Losing money or reputation allows for rebuilding, but when the very substance of existence, including the divine creator, simply ceases to exist, no blueprint remains. Society and modern psychiatry would look at Bernadette Roberts wandering the beach with no sense of self and diagnose a massive psychotic break, prescribing heavy medication to bring her back to normal. Bernadette possessed an incredibly rare, ruthless intellectual courage. Instead of running to doctors to be medicated back into the illusion, she walked straight into the blinding abyss. Refusing to pathologize her experience, she documented every agonizing, terrifying step of this journey in her groundbreaking book, The Experience of No Self. Through years of navigating this absolute void, she realized the most terrifying, liberating truth of all. The God she had experienced in the monastery, the loving presence she had cherished for decades, functioned as a subtle, highly refined, deeply beautiful projection of her own mind. As long as a you exists to experience God, duality remains. The subject continues looking at an object. Separation persists. The void she fell into revealed the raw, unnameable absolute itself, stripped of all human projections, archetypes, and religious comforting. The ultimate state of asangoham requires the death of absolutely all concepts, including the highest concept of God, letting the mind entirely dissolve until nothing remains but the sheer objective unblinking fact of existence becomes the only path forward. Bernadette Roberts went insane by the standards of both the secular world and the religious establishment. Losing her religion, her soul, and her God transformed her into one of the most profound, devastating, non-dual masters of the modern era. She proved that the ultimate truth demands the absolute willingness to be completely, permanently consumed by the dark.